If you look at the future now, it's not looking good.
You are now tuning into BaisWave.
Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of the Wijnhaven Reporter. Today we're at the BeeHive studio and we have the privilege of hosting Lars Westra to talk about his career as a children's rights activist. Apart from being a first-year international studies student, Lars Westra is an EU Youth Delegate to the UN, Vice Chair of Dutch NGO Coalition on Children's Rights, TEDx speaker, and an author of 2 books. Despite his young age, Lars continues to raise awareness about children's rights and give other children and young people a platform to make themselves heard. At a time when adults have failed to solve the world's problems, we'll discuss how children and young adults can take responsibility to protect the future they'll inherit from the dangers of climate change and global wars. Thank you for tuning in. Hello, Lars. Welcome to the studio. Thank you very much for being here with us today. So my first question for you is, what challenges did you face when you first began advocating for children's rights, and how did you overcome these challenges?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your introduction. I'm happy to be here. And I think the first question you ask is quite a relevant one, because many young activists face the same challenges. The fact that they are not taken seriously by people who are more experienced, who do have more knowledge maybe. And those people don't see the voices of children and young people as valuable as theirs. And I think that's a big mistake. But we'll probably talk later about why young voices are so important. Maybe the challenges I faced was, for example, when I was 12. And I gave a speech in my provincial parliament about the fact that they should listen more to children and young people, that they should take better care of climate change and global warming, and that they should ensure that all children and young people have the same opportunities to develop themselves. Mm-hmm. And one of the politicians called me a child climate soldier and told me that I had to play football instead of giving my opinion, and I had to leave it up to the adults to decide what to do now. And I was a bit flabbergasted. Mm-hmm. And because I was like, well, how can you say this to a 12-year-old who just raises his concerns and his ideas, who tries to make the world a better place for all of us? But she really didn't take me seriously. So I realized how long the way was we had to go to make sure that the voices of children and young people are really equal on the same level. And on the other side, also how important it was, because apparently we cannot trust politicians like her to take decisions in our interests as well. Mm-hmm. So that's why when I was 12, I decided to be a children's rights activist, to be a youth rights activist, and to make sure that children and young voices are at the tables where they are needed the most.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that we need to break the stigma against such people, right?
Yeah, I think we should take the voices of young people and of children as seriously as we do of people who might have more experience. And as I said, maybe young people don't have all the knowledge yet, but they do have other things that adults might not have, like the lived experience of being a young person now in 2026. Yeah. Maybe being not rusted and locked in old traditions and methods, but being able to think outside the box and come up with different solutions. And I think if you work together on an equal level, then you can accomplish the greatest things, but then you have to value each other's perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so now regarding the 3 books that you have written, what was your target audience for each of them, and what was the writing process like?
Well, writing a book is something really interesting to do, I think. So you say 3, normally I say 2. The last one was more like I collected all speeches that I gave around children's rights, and I published them, but not really published them, just put them in a book. Okay. But maybe for the first 2, the first one was really trying to give young people, children who are fighting for their rights, a stage to give to tell their stories. I interviewed them and I let them write a speech. Mm-hmm. They wanted to give for our parliament, and I collected them in a book, and I brought the book to the parliament. Oh, okay. So I didn't really write a lot myself, and it was still a very long process. Yeah. And after you're done with the writing, you think you're there, but then you send it to a publisher, and it comes back, and then it turns out you were only halfway. And I think with the second book, that was even more the case, because that was a whole book I wrote myself about why and how adults should listen more and better to the voices of young people, with my own experience as well, as I just told you when I was 12 in my provincial government, but also with the lessons I learned, the lessons I want to give to others for working with young people. And I also asked my network, I asked 20 people to write a short piece, and that was a long long process of writing a book, and it was even longer after the publisher came with their feedback. But in the end, it's always a magical moment if you have the first version of your book. So that's great.
Okay, and just an extra question: do you have a new book coming, or?
No.
No.
After my second book, I said to myself, well, let's do something else.
Okay.
For now.
Yeah, it sounds like a challenging process. Okay, then. So what do you think is because you talked about how you started when you were like 12. So what do you think is the earliest age at which someone can become an activist? And what do you think is the most efficient way for child and youth activists to mobilize adults?
I think that's a very hard question. I always am a bit cautious, like when connecting a different age to different actions, because all young people are different, of course, and all young people work in their own way. So what I did was giving speeches, was being an activist, writing books. But I also know activists who were protesting all the time in demonstrations, or who were using social media even more to mobilize adults. So everyone has their own way. So it's always a bit hard to say, well, when you're 12, you should do this. But I think we shouldn't underestimate what young people can, but young people also shouldn't underestimate themselves. Thinking, well, we should go to school, and after we have 5 masters, then our opinion is important. I think young people should value their perspective now as well, knowing that they don't have all the knowledge yet. So maybe they shouldn't engage in a debate about quantum physics or whatever, but they can engage in a debate about education, because they're here at the university every day. And they can engage in a debate about climate, because they are the ones that will suffer from the consequences in the most horrible ways possible. So I think it's hard to put an age on it.
Yeah.
But I think my main advice would be do something you like, and do something that you really believe in. And maybe a concern you have, or an idea you have, or a problem you see, and try to move the world in your own way.
So you're saying that everyone's unique and everyone has a different life and different approach to how they treat activism and politics.
Exactly, and some become a politician and others become a scientist or a professional footballer. And I think you can't expect from a professional footballer to go in politics or the other way around.
Yeah, there isn't a single path for anybody,
Indeed,
right? Yeah. Okay. So as far as I know, you're also the EU Youth Delegate to the UN, and I want to ask you about that experience as well. So how did you become an EU Youth Delegate, and what has the experience of representing the EU taught you so far?
Well, maybe to begin with the first part, as I said, I've been a children's rights activist since I was 12. I worked with a lot of NGOs on projects, and one of the NGOs I worked with was our National Youth Council. And on their site, I saw that the EU delegation in New York, so the EU delegation to the United Nations, was looking for a youth delegate, which means representing the voices of young people at UN events. So whether it's a General Assembly or a youth forum or the Commission on the Status of Women, being there, having consulted European youth, and trying to represent their perspective in the best way as possible. So really, in short, that's what we're doing. And then what has it taught me? I think many things. The world of diplomacy is really a unique but also very weird world, where everything is always a bit slow. You can argue that it is maybe not very effective, but then on the other side, it's also, if you think about it, amazing that there is a place where countries can meet who would maybe normally not meet, who can first try to solve issues in a peaceful way before they might start a war. So I think you can say many things about the United Nations, about diplomacy, but I think it's the best we have, and we have a big problem if we don't have it like this.
Okay, well, yeah, my next question was going to be about the UN as well. So, like, you went to the UN General Assembly in New York, right? So what was your main takeaway from your trip to the General Assembly as the EU Youth Delegate? And did it change any of your opinions about the UN's role in protecting children's rights specifically?
Well, I think I learned many different things in New York, and of course about the United Nations, about how effective it is, how maybe it could be improved. I've been at the negotiations for a resolution on children's rights, but also on programs and policies involving young people. And that's really a unique process where I went in there with the idea we're going to talk about young people in Gaza and in Ukraine, and young people in extreme poverty in Africa, or with mental health issues. And it stayed a bit more in an abstract way. Also, more progressive countries proposing progressive language on sexual reproductive health and rights, and more conservative countries immediately stepping up and saying we don't support this and this needs to be taken out of this resolution immediately or we won't adopt the resolution. And then it feels like they're really against each other. They're total opposite perspectives, and in the end, I think, and that's fascinating to see that there are three people trying to facilitate the process and ending up with a language that everyone can agree on. So both Russia and Australia, for example, both the EU and Argentina not, but more Latin America countries. And on this youth resolution, we tried to influence the negotiations a bit. Almost all countries in the world in the end voted in favor of it, especially except the US, Argentina, and Israel. All countries in the world said we agree with this, and I think that's yes, it was a slow process. It took months. They were arguing over a one word, one comma. Should we emphasize it or underline it because those words mean different things in the UN? So yes, that's weird, but in the end, if you end up with a result that everyone is equally disappointed with, well, then apparently you did a good job.
Okay, so you're saying that even though many countries may disagree on many topics, there are still some topics that they agree on, so you're optimistic about, like...
Yes, okay. I think there are many topics they still agree on, and apparently there is a way to find middle ground in something they can all sort of live with.
Exactly.
Maybe what I specifically learned about youth and about youth voices at the UN is that it's really hard to be really heard at the UN. There are many different ways. You have the Youth Delegate program. We have the UN Youth Office since 2023. There's Assistant Secretary General for Youth Affairs. So it is quite high on the agenda, it seems. Yeah. Also because a significant part of the world's population is under 25. Way more than we might think here in Europe. But there are African countries where half of the population is under the age of 18. So we are a significant part of the world's population, and we are quite high on the agenda. But for young people, it's still hard to really influence the processes, influence the decisions. And that is what I spoke about earlier, that we're not really taken seriously. But also because if young people are consulted, it's mostly on youth-related topics. So maybe education, or youth mental health, or a youth resolution. But way less on topics as climate change, international peace and security.
Yeah, some of the most important, actually.
Some of the most important topics. And it's really, really hard to try to give your perspective on that. But it is the thing we tried with writing a letter to the Security Council. The body of the UN that is like the most closed, I think I would say. It's the hardest to influence it. It was already a huge achievement that they accepted our letter in their database. So apparently I thought, well, of course, that's logic. If you get a letter, you read it. But it was already a huge achievement that they accepted it. But we also, for example, presented a manifesto as EU Youth Delegates together with our Ukrainian colleagues, urging for the involvement of youth, specifically in peace negotiations. So if two countries both want to end a war and they sit down at the table, we need young people there as well. Because young people are the group that must maintain the peace, that must ensure that it's a lasting peace that can last generations, and not just a short break in a conflict.
No, it's our future, right?
Indeed, and I think peace negotiated by only a few is unable to serve the many. So I think we need as many perspectives at the table, and especially those of young people.
Okay, so far we've talked about how you started your career and what you're doing right now, and I also want to keep asking you about what your goals are for the future. So considering the impact of the ongoing wars and global warming on the future of children, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future, and what are your other plans?
Well, I think if you talk about ongoing wars and climate change, it's quite hard to be optimistic.
Yes.
And I think that's also is the honest answer, is that if you look at the future now, it's not looking good. I think we probably will be the first generation in a long time that will have a worse quality of life than our parents had. So I think that's not really a reason to be optimistic. But on the other side, in this position, I also have the opportunity to speak with a lot of young people, peace builders, for example, from Africa, climate activists here from Europe, journalists from Latin America. And I think to see young people stepping up, building their community, contributing to the world they live in, trying to shape the future in a good way, I think that really gives me hope. And it also shows me that although young people are living in a conflict zone, although they are affected by a war in every way possible, mental health, education, job opportunities, they still have peace in them and they still want to fight for peace. And not only in conflict areas, but also here within the European Union, where there is not a conflict, but there might not be peace either. Because it's a famous saying that peace is not just the absence of war. Peace is that there's also justice, equal opportunities. Peace is that you are able to trust, not to fear. Peace is that you can dream about a better world. And I think we have to make progress in that as well in the European Union to really work towards a really peaceful society. But I trust our generation to do so.
Okay. And do you have any plans for your future projects, or is there anything specific that you can tell us about?
That you can tell us about. I think that's the most important part of your question. No, I'll be the EU Youth Delegate till September.
Okay.
So we're going to go to New York 2 more times to try to get the priorities of European youth as high on the agenda as possible in meetings with diplomats, at events, in negotiations. And apart from that, I'll see. I really like it personally, the international atmosphere in the international stage.
Okay.
But I cannot tell you, but I also don't know yet
Okay.
what my personal future plans are.
Okay. We'll catch up later.
Yes, we will.
But yeah, I think I also agree that we have to find a middle ground, because if we're too pessimistic about the future, then we can just like end up giving up. But I think having hope is the most important thing that we can have right now.
Yeah, I think giving up is the worst thing we can do.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe we can end on that note, hope. But yeah, thank you for being with us here today. Yeah, I wish you good luck with your future projects, whatever they are. We'll find out. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.